Welcome to Minority Focus. I'm your host, Jimmie Moore. I'd like to begin by saying there are some people in the city who have caused some other people some very serious pain and suffering, if you will, and I'll leave that alone by saying somebody should not have done what was done to Stanley Beauchamp. And my prayer is that the Lord will not put more of a punishment on you than you can stand. That's my prayer. Welcome to the show. I want to address that. We've got a really good show today. John Poole, who's been here any number of times, well, what, 3 times, 2 times?
3 times.
And today joining is Dale Elliott, who is, or was, and is, involved with and still interested in the Jessica Currin murder case over in Mayfield that happened back in the year 2000. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to mention on his own time, and John only put him up in a tent in his backyard. And
No, he didn't even do that. I had to drive from
He had to drive this morning. He had to drive from Louisville.
but
the fuel's cheaper here.
Yeah.
with serious interest in that particular case, he is still about it. I'd like to mention that part of the capacity that he is in now is irrelevant to the fact that he was an investigator for the Innocence Project.
Yes, sir.
Back during that time frame, and did some work with that, came down and did some investigations, and as many of us have done, shook our heads and were very frustrated and in awe of how things had happened. Very glad you came.
Thank you.
After all these years, why still? Why still?
Well, the number one reason is for Joe Currin. I have the utmost respect for that man.
Yes.
I really like him. You know, to see something like this happen, it's a heartbreaking, heart-wrenching thing. And Joe's a good man. I've never met his daughter, obviously, but what I've learned in this investigation, nobody deserves what happened to her. Nobody.
For sure.
And you know, like somebody said, justice for Jessica and for Joe, and I've never met his wife, but her too. You know, and plus the fact that, you know, integrity in law enforcement is a big deal. I've got 15 years almost in law enforcement, and you know, and integrity, doing the right thing even when nobody else is watching.
John mentions that often, uses that very phrase,
Yeah.
integrity in law enforcement.
It's an important thing because we don't want to lose credibility. We do not want to lose credibility. And, you know, there were a lot of mistakes, legitimate mistakes, but there were a lot of things that were not mistakes, that were just, excuse me, but dumb. Just dumb.
Right.
There may be some political motivations behind it. I have no evidence of that, but I have gut feelings that there were a lot of politics involved. And, you know, politics should not be part of law enforcement.
For sure.
Politics, you know, should not be part of it. And we'll just, you know, we'll go from there. That just, we've got to do better.
From my conversation with John and things that I've read and some CDs that I watched and all of that, I think, to me anyway, one of the most mystifying things was the crime scene that was
Yes.
involved in the. I don't know nothing about investigating and all that sort of stuff. But even us dumb folk don't know better than what happened about that. How could it be? Evidence at the crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
Never makes it to where it's
Right. I don't know what happened there. part of the problem is the assistant chief, Mr. Lear, put a brand new police officer, a guy just out of the academy, not too long before that, in charge of an investigation. I was chief of police, and I wasn't chief of police of an agency as big as Mayfield. But for one thing, my police department would have never touched that investigation. I would have called somebody in from the beginning that that would have had the skills and the money to be able to do the investigation correctly. Why he would put a brand new police officer as the chief investigator is mystifying, if not corruptible itself. You know, if I don't want to think that Ronnie Lear's a dumb man. I don't really know him, but you're either incompetent or you're trying to mess up an investigation. And I don't know. This is my opinion on that.
No doubt, in John's case, no doubt, but I'll ask you this question anyway.
Sure.
Do you feel or know, if you will, that your investigation, your efforts in the matter were intentionally thwarted?
Well, my efforts, as far as the agency I was working with, I was assigned to the Kentucky Innocence Project.
Right.
I never had any problems in that agency with that. The problems I had is when we would do open records requests to Kentucky State Police, and we would get the response that Kentucky State Police, and it was their attorney, would not release information because it was they called it an ongoing investigation, even though it had been adjudicated in the court system,
Right.
and the individuals were in prison.
Right.
They would not release that information. So there's things to this to this investigation that I don't have all the pieces,
Right.
and I would, you would think that Kentucky State Police would work with other agencies. Why they don't is, I would say that it's not corruption as far as money wise or criminal, but corruption in the fact, and it's not really corruption. It's being arrogant or afraid to admit that you were wrong. Right. Now, on that, I want to give. At that time, Kentucky State Police was in an incredible amount of pressure to get this case solved, and it was obvious that at this point, whoever was going to be the first person that they can get was going to be the person, because you had the Attorney General's office, you had the community, there was political, there was community, there was a lot of pressure, and as the community, you want answers, you want them as quickly as possible.
For sure.
But you don't want to have them so quickly that things are happening that are getting misplaced or are tainted. I was assigned to the DNA section of Kentucky Innocence Project, and when you look at the handling of the evidence, from what I can tell, it'd be really difficult to pull DNA off some of these evidence pieces because it's so contaminated. So the sad part is I don't know that you'll ever find out who actually did the murder as far as physical evidence.
In this case, it may be a matter of course, well, not finding out who did the actuals, but perhaps vindicating someone who didn't.
Exactly.
This question, and both of you can do what you will with it.
Okay.
From what I read and understand, the Innocence Project don't play.
Right.
They get down and they help people get out of falsely accusation or whatever.
Right.
What happened to it? What happened?
Well, the National Innocence Project has found that 300 people were wrongfully convicted and have got them released for prison. One of the concerns that I had and my family and others had, we couldn't have asked for a better investigator than Dale and the attorney he worked with, Randy Wheeler. But a concern that we always had with the way the Innocence Project is set up in Kentucky, it's under the Criminal Justice Cabinet. So you have the state police, you have the Corrections Department, you have the Department of Public Advocacy. In the Innocence Project, all under the director of that cabinet, which you have conflicting interests there. So it's hard for them, I believe, to at least there be the perception of conflict. And on top of that, one of the lead investigators for the KBI under the Attorney General's office was Lee Wise. And Lee Wise's wife is the general counsel for the Criminal Justice Cabinet. So there was always our concern, because we would get going with the Innocence Project investigators, and they would be pulled off this case and put on something else every time we got going well.
Excuse me, John. From what I've understood, Innocence Project ran out of money.
Yeah, yeah.
So we stopped.
Okay.
And John is just saying everything comes under this cabinet or whatever, da-da-da-da-da. So different steps along this cabinet. You'd like to have this taken care of,
All right.
working for the Innocence Project. This guy in this agency may not. This guy in this agency kind of blew it.
Right.
Somebody up here knows somebody that blew it. It might be related to somebody who blew it. So in the final analysis, somebody up here has taken care of this business that has not been taken care of down here. Straight up. Can you do straight up?
Straight up, and for me, and honestly, I never had any pressure. The only pressure we had is that the fact that there were only, at that point, I was the only investigator in that office, and we had a lot of cases to go through. So, you know, I'm just speaking for me.
Yeah.
I never had any pressure. I don't know about the other people, the attorney and people above me.
Right.
I can't answer for that.
Right.
But for me, I never had any pressure except for we had so many other cases, and I needed to work on those also, which we knew we were running out of grant money. I mean, you can look at the federal government right now, and there's not a lot of money anyway. So we knew the grant was going to run out. So we were scrambling, trying to get as many cases as we can work on, and I was working a lot of cases. But there is a obvious a disconnect that should have happened. And I understand where he's coming from. We had one of the KBI investigators was married to the lady that was like a general counsel.
General
or
counsel
something.
for the Criminal Justice.
Oh, the Criminal Justice Cabinet, and you know that.
Oh, excuse me. Do that again. Can you do that again? One of the
Investigators of the KBI investigators.
that did not take care of business.
Right. Well, didn't investigate it properly, I think.
Okay. Is married to.
Right. One of the lead counsel attorneys.
The general counsel.
General counsel, an attorney for the Department of Criminal Justice.
As Artie Johnson used to say in the
Justice
old
Cabinet.
comedy, very interesting.
Yes. Again, and I'm saying out of me, I never had that kind of pressure, but I don't know above me. I can't.
And I don't know that it would really be pressure, Jimmy. I don't think it was done that way. And again, it's all perception. We were moving along, and they would be moved to something else, and we wouldn't hear from them for months. And part of that, probably a lot of that was workload. But when they were, their grant ran out, I spoke to their supervisor, and I was always told that somebody would pick up because this case had merit,
Right.
and they would continue. But that didn't happen. And then when I talked to Linda Smith, who I believe was your immediate supervisor,
The last supervisor.
she said that both the attorney and the investigator said the case didn't have merit to go forward.
Right.
And that was never the impression that I got, especially when you're getting information from some of the state's key witnesses that they claim they were forced to lie about the evidence in this case.
Innocence Project runs out of funding.
Right.
Scenario. Coast Guard go rescue those guys out there on the ship. Okay, we'll go get them. Oh, well, we're out here so far. We're out of funds.
Unfortunately. yeah.
Okay, more funds have come in. Are those guys still out there? Let's go back out and get them. They're still out there. Did the Innocence Project ever get any more money?
Not, the way I understand, I don't know because I'm not part of the Innocence
Okay,
Project
okay,
anymore.
okay.
I don't know if they got any more money or not. They still got investigators, but I'm not. My portion of it was DNA, and
Oh, okay.
right, and that DNA section, I believe, is no longer there.
Well, you can't. I don't know. Like I said, I don't do this. Never done it. Don't know how people do it and all that sort of thing. But it just seems that if funding determines what you do,
Right.
and the organization is still functional, still doing what it does, then more money has come, obviously. But this case solved.
Well, if I can, and I'm going off memory because I don't have my notes anymore.
understand.
All that was turned in
Right,
years
right.
ago when I left. But my recommendation, what I thought was what I'd like to have had happen is because there's very little chance of the DNA, any DNA, because I actually didn't know what kind of evidence we had left. Because the DNA section was gone, I was hoping that the other side of the Innocence Project would have picked it up, and then which a lot of that is through college students. They have college students that are going through law school, and they can do it. I was hoping that would happen, and I don't know. I haven't been in contact with them, and I don't want to say anything I don't know. So, but that's what I was hoping. But for me, and I don't, as far as the time frame here, what I think that we need to concentrate on this particular case is the evidence. The bottom line for me is what the Commonwealth says happened in the Quincy Cross trial.
Right.
And the physical evidence and the evidence that is pretty bold, that's right there, it doesn't match. Now I don't know if there's something else that I'm missing that Kentucky State Police wouldn't release to us, so I don't know. But from what I've got and what I've gotten through the other attorneys that were involved, it doesn't look. There's no way that the Commonwealth's case and the evidence matches. And if the change of venue had happened anywhere else in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, then that verdict wouldn't have happened. I honestly believe it.
I kind of want to agree with you there, But it's like, it seems like, I want to build this bridge. But if I build this bridge, and it's already evident, it's going to kill all them fish down there that are important, whatever. And everybody screams, no, don't build the bridge, don't build the bridge. Can't you see you're going to destroy the fish? For me to get that done, then I need someone of importance to do me a favor and go ahead and get this done anyway. I don't know if I'm making any sense or not.
Well, what I'm seeing on what you're maybe going to, and what I saw myself, is that because of the pressure from the community at that time, there were several marches and everything that they had to get this case solved. You had the Attorney General at the time was running for governor or lieutenant governor or something.
Yeah, Lieutenant Governor Greg Stumbo.
Correct. And the guy that was under him was running for attorney general.
Conway.
Exactly. So they don't want this festering in Western Kentucky, which is very important for votes. So we've got to get this case solved, no matter what the cost, even if it's putting somebody innocent in prison. They got to get it solved before the election day.
I know people have addressed this. Something has to have reached those people you just mentioned about this. So what's it like, Mr. Stumbo? Something was wrong about this. I know you awarded this woman who solved the case, whatever, but something was wrong about this. How do you address that? What do you have to say about that? And as politicians do sometimes. Well, I was in New York some years ago, and there was a festival there, a number of people, and this guy was there, and it was a very warm day, and in the year 19 so-and-so and so-and-so, and I had on a gray suit, and my tie didn't match though, and kids were off, and so-and-so and so-and-so. During that time, things were kind of, and give you this 30 minutes of nothing, or has he addressed it at all? Has he even addressed it? The people that you just mentioned, surely they've been approached in some form or fashion.
I don't know that answer.
Well, I can answer part of that. In fact, Dale was at one meeting we had with an assistant U.S. attorney in Louisville, and we presented evidence to him, and we referred to the FBI, and ultimately met with the FBI agents in Bowling Green and turned over evidence to them. And the last we heard, this is months ago, that they had nothing to go forward on.
The FBI said that.
The FBI said that, and so that we never got any reason or anything, even though in this affidavit that Dale has produced, Victoria Caldwell, one of the key witnesses in this case, a diary was introduced that supposedly was produced by her that implicated one of the defendants.
Right.
She claims they forced her to write that in the back of a car driving down the road. And it's really interesting because the Secret Service testified at the cross trial that the ink that the diary was written in was not on record, and they have one of the most extensive records in the world. Now that would tell you two things. Some inks never make it in there, which is rare for that, or the ink had been manufactured at a later date, because there's always several years lag time, and that trial was in 2008. So if the ink was manufactured in 2006 or 7, it could very well not have been in that file. And that's what we've tried to get the federal authorities to look into, the civil rights violations. And I can just say this, as a former police officer, I've been investigated for allegedly violating people's civil rights. We've just asked for an investigation to look at this. There's been so many things said on this, and it'll never be settled. Like Dale said, the tragedy for the most part is the Currin family. They're decent people, and Joe Currin will tell you, because they will say now, well, why did he go along with it? He went along with it because it was the only show in town, and now he even tells me now that he knows there was problems with that case, but he went along with it.
And Joe Currin now says the other tragedy is Quincy being incarcerated. This girl, Victoria,
she's been given thousands
$40,000
$40,000
from the State Farm Corporation, even though they know she lied a bunch, recanted testimony, and all of that stuff. I said one time, in talking to John and them, so it seems like this case was handled by Barney and Gomer, but no, they weren't. They weren't Barneys and Gomers.
The people who investigated the case as far as KBI were Bob O'Neill was a very qualified investigator for narcotics, and if you look at the Attorney General's office right now, that's the main thing that they do, a lot of political corruption and narcotics investigations and stuff like that. Okay. There's very little homicide investigators in that unit. If there's none that I know of. And the thing is that I'm from the Louisville area, and I know a lot of the same people that he knows. Right. And he was a narcotics investigator from the beginning. And when this was happening, I'd learned from another detective in Louisville that he said that he did not know how to work a homicide investigation. He said that that the KBI office told him to work it as if he would work a narcotics investigation. You can't do that. And it's obvious, you know, with the threats and we're going to take your welfare away, we're going to take your food stamps, we're going to take this and we're going to take all this stuff away from you. We're going to threaten you in your interviews. That's how they do in narcotics investigations.
I've heard too many people say, if I'm going to get in trouble, I'm not going to get in trouble in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now, my history and all of this stuff is not good, but I find it real hard to understand. We are the United States of America. The law is for the United States of America. How do states do their own thing without, like you're just mentioning that Kentucky did, the state of Kentucky does, we're the president. You mentioned earlier that the FBI got called off. The FBI didn't go any further. I thought only the president could call the FBI off of something.
No,
Interesting.
No, that's the
No,
U.S.
that-
Attorney's
I
office.
don't mean the president,
Yeah.
literally. But I mean, it has to go, KBSI can't call the FBI off, can they? Or, I guess they can.
I don't. I would just be guessing.
I would
wouldn't do
say it could be more a can of worms that if you get into this, I mean, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to cause embarrassment.
Right.
And people would say, well, why look at this? That's
You're going to get sued.
Yeah, and those
royally.
type things. But again, it gets back, and we say it over and over, if we don't have integrity in law enforcement, if it all comes out perfectly clean for what the state police, the KBI, and Mayfield Police Department did, then the public is better served. But I don't think that's how the investigation's going to come out.
Again, I don't know what I'm talking about when this sort of thing goes out, really. But it's just some things I cannot conceive. Dale, you came down and you talked to these people.
Yes.
You interviewed them. You asked this Caldwell girl how'd she first get into all of this. She's supposed to have been a key player.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells you she heard about some reward money being offered for information.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why she launched off into it. And then Phoenicia Stubblefield, the two of them thought they could collect some money by making up some statements. They said that to you?
Yes. Well, one in particular, and I don't have my notes in front of me, so I'm not sure which one it was. But
Well,
she
repeat
said that.
You can repeat that if you like.
She said that, I'm a drug addict. You give me $100, and I'll tell you anything you want me to tell you. And, not just this case. I know that's a fact anyway.
That I've had that. I mean, if somebody's on drugs, is a cop, and I give them, or even whether you're a cop, they'll do anything for $100.
This girl was given big money.
Oh, yeah.
She was given big money.
Well, one was given thousands of dollars. She ran up a phone bill, $900 in a hotel, and if she was in protective custody, this is just in a day or so, why would you even allow her to have outside phone calls?
She started up a website of herself or something like that?
She had a website.
The one that's in the witness protection
Yeah,
program?
and it was in like a skimpy type clothing that she...
You're in the witness protection program, from what I understand. You don't call mama, daddy, cousins, nobody. You don't call nobody because you got to, sorry, bye. I'll contact you maybe one day.
right.
This girl runs up a $900 and something phone bill calling people.
Yeah.
From what I've read, Quincy Cross is in prison or jail. And the reason she's in protective custody, because he might do something to her.
Yeah.
In prison. He was a put up guy. He had the mafia, the black mafia, all of them under his belt to reach and get her, so they put her in protective custody. What the heck?
Well, it was interesting. Supposedly Quincy Cross was threatening her in California, but yet if you look at the investigation, they never interviewed her live-in boyfriend to see who was doing what. There was very little. In fact, when Wise and O'Neill went out to California and contacted her, they took her to the Santa Maria Police Department, and they did an extensive job of investigating that with the best they knew. And she was administered a polygraph there, and it indicated she was being deceptive. But magically, they take her to Louisville PD, where O'Neill was employed, and she doesn't show deception. And of course, polygraphs aren't perfect, but if you just look, it's like a trail. It's just like for years, a bat was the crime instrument that they struck her with. When they couldn't find a bat after they tore up Rosie Christ's property, magically, they found a wrench out there, let it set for 2 days, and then magically, the socket wrench becomes the instrument that struck her, and it went click, click. If I hit him with a socket wrench, it's not going to click, click. It only clicks So they were feeding her to that, I believe, feeding her that information.
Can we get back to the evidence on that one? Because the autopsy reports, the medical examiner drew the head injuries, and the head injuries were not really consistent with a ratchet. A ratchet is rounded on the top. It's rounded on every which way, just about. The injuries on the back of her head were consistent with a brick the size that you would find that was behind Mayfield Middle School, that type of brick. In the autopsy diagram, the drawings by the medical examiner, it was like a V-shaped, upside down V, that would be consistent with a corner and the size of a brick.
Hadn't heard that. Hadn't read that.
Yes, sir.
You know,
So, and going back to the evidence, and that for me, I think that's the key more than anything
I
else.
agree.
By looking at the actual evidence, by looking at the crime scene photos themselves and what was there, what they said happened could not have happened. All right, they're saying that this young lady was beaten in a car, beaten unconscious in a car. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while.
Well, they have one story, and then they walked her in, but they have two stories.
Okay.
So,
Well, she was then taken into the house, into the back of the house, where she was raped, where she was strangled, where she died, and then they raped her again. Okay. Then they're saying that she was moved, her body was moved from the house to a backyard garage type shed. Keep in mind, today is August the 2nd, right? This is the time frame that all this was happening. Okay, now the weather we have out there is like October weather, but generally, everybody knows Kentucky weather.
Smoking.
From July to August, this time frame, we're looking at 100-degree temperatures. All right, and I hate to get too graphic about this, but you unfortunately you have to.
Yes.
She was moved to a shed, and they said that the reason they moved her from the shed to the middle school was that her body was beginning to stink. Okay, so she's wrapped up in sheet. Her body's getting ready to stink. Was starting to stink. At that point, when your body's decaying, you're going to have maggots. Okay. You move this body that's wrapped up in a sheet, put the body in the back of a car, take the body that's in the cart to the Mayfield Middle School, remove the body out of the car, and place the body in the back of Mayfield Middle School. There's no sheet that she was wrapped up in. So you're going to tell me that these people removed the sheet and took it with them. She was raped, but the crime scene photos, she still got her clothes on.
and both girls testified at the trial that she was nude. So who put the clothes back on a bloated body?
Remember the dictator Idi Amin? Are you old enough to remember him? You remember Idi Amin over in Africa?
Oh, yes, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
He would kill people, whatever, and people would say, Idi Amin, 10 of my relatives came up missing, and he would say, oh yeah, they get killed in a car crash. Idi Amin, so many kids got me, oh yeah, they get killed in a bus crash. His excuses were so lame, it was pathetic, and the whole world knew. In this case, there are things that are so lame, the whole world knows. Mm-hmm. I'll never understand why the United States judicial system hasn't done anything about this.
Well,
It's lurid.
I don't know what to tell you on that, my focus is the crime scene and the Commonwealth's case,
Yeah.
so we can get some type of answers. And maybe if we can get the U.S. Attorney to actually put somebody on this case and investigate it, maybe we can get those answers of why that happened. I think locally you have a lot of mistakes, and a lot of people do not want to admit that they make mistakes. You know, back with the crime scene, what another thing that keyed up to me is that her shoes, she had sandals on, okay? Now, the right sandal was on the right side of the body. The left sandal was on the left side of the body. She was beat up in a car, walked or carried into a house, then wrapped up, put into a shed, then put in the shed into the trunk of a car, and then Mayfield Middle School. What is the chances that the left shoe is going to be left side of the body and the right shoe is going to be on the right side of the body? You know, the other thing that was key to me is that and I mentioned this to the coroner when I talked to him about this case, there were no burnt maggots on the body, which tells you that the body was there, the body at Mayfield Middle School. It was burnt there, and then the maggots came in, okay? If it was the Commonwealth's way, you would have had burnt maggots. You would have had that. You see what I'm saying? And the coroner, when I mentioned that to the coroner, he was like, we never thought about that.
Then the other thing, they had one of the heaviest rainfalls just before that. And the story was that they drove up there and took the body out of a trunk. There was no pictures or evidence in any of the crime scene evidence that there was marks on that. And then two, in my experience of having to deal with deceased people, when you pick the body up, there's slippage.
Yes.
And we immediately put them in a body bag to catch that. There was no evidence of that.
You had 6 inches?
6 to 7 inches of penetration of body fluids into that ground. Are you telling me if they brought the body over there that night that you could get that and there would be no indication of any fluids outside of that area?
The grass was dead underneath of her
As
body.
far as the coroner is concerned, and any number of other people, ignorance is not bliss.
Well, and I don't want to say he's ignorant. I'm just saying that
nor am I.
that he missed that,
Yeah.
you know. And
But oversight didn't see that speed sign.
right.
But I think a lot of people in official capacities know this is wrong. And it's very, very hard to step up and say it's wrong because it's going against the system.
My dear old mom used to always say, what's done in the dark will soon come to the light. And as you and I and David Cross, and that's a beauty in this, I think, that Joe Currin and David Cross
Yes.
Yeah.
understand each other. That says a whole world
That's
about
why I'm
how
still
this
involved
should
with it.
go, about how it should
'Cause of
go.
them.
But, you know, it may or not. My kids text me sometimes, and they started using this thing, SMH.
Shaking my head.
I did not have a clue.
I didn't even know what
I
that
only
meant.
figured it out recently.
For a long time. Me and you both.
They got LOL too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the LOL, it took me a while to get to that, you know, amongst other stuff. But this SMH took me a while. I never did ask them. I think one of them volunteered it to me somehow one day. I imagine that's what a lot of people did in the case. I don't mean you, and of course I don't mean John, but a lot of them just like, wow, and went away, you know, just shaking their heads, and I'm so thankful that.
When there's been no continuity, it started first with the Mayfield Police Department, like Dale said. The investigator is beyond my comprehension of all the years of law enforcement that I've had. They could say that's the only person that was there to do it. I know other people there that could have done that, and so why that person ever got that job, and then it moves on up to the state police, and then that person that's first charged with doing the investigation, he's terminated, and then you get another investigator of the state police, and probably the one that, in my opinion, wrecked it up the worst, you had a private investigator that's unlicensed named Susan Galbert, who now supposedly is working with the BBC to make a movie about how a housewife solved this crime that nobody else could.
In whatever capacity, either of you, somebody comes to you and tells you they've done your job. They've accomplished what you're supposed to be doing. It ain't got nothing to do with what you do. We have no authorization whatsoever. Nothing that says they authorized to even be in it in the first place. What do you do with them? How come they do this?
From me, and if you're referring to Susan Galbraith, people are going to give you information, and you want every bit of information you can get, good or bad. You want to know, you want to get something, because hopefully you can. It's kind of like going to an archaeological dig, and you put a whole bunch of dirt in there, and you shake it and shake it and shake it, so you can find the treasures, the good stuff. So you want that, you want cooperation. But what you don't want is to involve a citizen that has absolutely no law enforcement or investigative experience at all, just watches whatever on TV. You don't want to involve them in the investigation. They're not part of the investigation. Take their information, look, put it in the sifter to find out if there's anything to it. But
Stumbo had all that checked out, right?
I don't know what Stumbo did.
Surely, he had
Well,
his guys go down and check out all her stuff before he give her this award, right? She got an award.
As soon as the indictments were filed against the defendants, Susan Galbraith got an award by Greg Stumbo, and the only one that I know that he's ever given for outstanding citizenship.
Did you say he's running for some office now?
He was running for lieutenant governor at that time. And the indictments came down in the latter part of March, which maybe is just coincidental. But like Dale said, I believe there was a lot of pressure to get that case resolved, because the only thing they had were these witnesses' statements that claims that they were forced to lie. When I investigate something, even today when I do investigations, you can tell me you did something or he did it. If I can't collaborate that with hard evidence, it doesn't mean anything. They took and got the statements and massaged the statements, in my opinion, and made it work. But it doesn't fit the crime scene.
Dale, when you were first assigned to come down with the Innocence Project or whatever, what did you expect?
Well, to be honest, the first part of it, when I first got into it, I just read over the state's file, and just reading over what I got, I was like, well, these people are guilty. So I didn't go any further. And then a few cases later, I was working a different case, and one of the attorneys that I talked to said, you might want to look at the Jeff Burton, Quincy Cross case. He said, that's where you all need to be. And so I revisited that, and I started looking at the case differently, right, instead of just reading what the Commonwealth's case was. And then I was seeing all these inconsistencies, and that what the trial transcripts were saying, and these photos of the crime scene and the evidence, it was like a sledgehammer hit me. I was like, this doesn't make sense. So then I started digging more, and it's come to the point where we're here today.
Right.
So, at first, again, reading the Commonwealth's case, yeah, they're guilty. But then getting into it and finding out more information, it's like, okay, now you see what the problem is.
I'm sure both of you can answer this totally legitimately, but do you get cases sometimes and you think, oh yeah, we're going to take care of this. So we got too much stuff that we can take care of this. And do you get other cases that say, oh my God, this is
a lot of work, yeah.
Yeah.
Or, like you just mentioned earlier, like you said earlier, Dale, we may never know.
Right.
You know that.
Right.
But by what has happened tells you that the backtracking to get it right or whatever ain't going to happen.
This case, you don't. The sad point is that I'm not sure we'll ever find, like I said, find the people who actually did this. Yeah. Again, I've got gut feelings of who I think did it. Let me go on and say that I think the original suspects are the good suspects. Okay. Again, going back to the scene and going back to the autopsy drawings and photographs. This young lady was beaten badly in her face. Her nose was broke. Okay, her chin was busted, as in. Now, you know, I can only guess. And she was stabbed. Don't forget, she was stabbed also. Somebody attacked her, and there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of anger, or they were trying to send a message to other people.
Right.
No matter what, either one of those, she was brutally killed. And that's, again, that's why I'm no longer part of the investigation. But what I've learned, I can't not be involved.
Quincy Cross strangled her to death with his belt. That's a figment of somebody's imagination.
I think that where the belt comes in this, I think everybody's gotten a bloody nose or got hit in the head. I know one day I was working on my car and I hit the glove compartment on the top of my head and I bled something awful. Mm-hmm. All right, when you have head wounds, you bleed a lot. Where the belt comes in on this, I believe, again, going off the pictures, where she was found is not where she stopped her movement, okay? They beat her, they did everything that they were going to do to her. Then they moved her body to that particular location, all right? Looking at the way her legs were placed, somebody carried underneath her legs to move her body, and somebody had to move the top of her body. They did not want to get blood all over themselves, so what do? You take a belt, wrap it around her neck, and lift up with the belt to move the body. Mm-hmm. Because underneath of her body was her hand, all right? And when you move a body and you start going to the place where you're going to stop it, your hand's dragging the ground, it's going to go underneath the body because you're moving in that direction. Make sense? Are you following me?
Definitely.
And then that's where they found her. All right? That's where, and again, it's just me guessing, but I think that's where the belt comes in on this, because whoever had to move the top of her body didn't want her blood all over them.
I wonder, and I'm sure you do too, is CSNBC, Paula Khan, Tom Brokaw, somebody of that caliber, going to have to do this, going to have to take care of this somehow? Is it going to have to get to them before anything will ever be done?
That's one thing the Currin family and our family and the other Cross family and the others involved have looked to, and because there really can't be any justice. Our system throughout the United States naturally is slow in getting you out. It's quick, I've said on the show before, to get yourself injected into the criminal justice system, but it's hard to get out. And you can watch the TV shows they have now on Dateline or whatever, where it's obvious these people didn't commit the crime, but the state prosecutor or whatever is not usually going to admit that.
Is there a why to that? Is there an answer to the question, why not?
Well, I think
politics, re-elections.
Yeah, re-elections. There might be a lawsuit filed. It's hard when, and I'm just saying this from being a law enforcement officer, it's hard for me to admit I made a mistake.
You mean like I'm running for office and a whole bunch of people think this guy ought to be in jail. If I let him out now, I won't get their votes?
Well, I think in this particular case that you had several people running for high office, and they needed to calm the public down in western Kentucky, and the only way to do that is get a conviction.
So they calmed a bunch of them down.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, well, good, the case is solved. That's all we need to know about it. But here we are, many years later, and we're still talking about this case.
And you like I when you read the case. When I first read the case, yeah, the guy probably did
Exactly.
that. So if they convict somebody, then the majority of people who don't know any better than to believe what they read in the papers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So now we're both for the guy.
And they had, it was all the perfect storm too. You had a group of people that had no money, that had little run-ins with the law before, that was the perfect ones that really didn't have an alibi because they didn't even know anything about what went on. And you had this tremendous pressure to put somebody in jail, and Mr. Currin, rightfully so, was going around asking for justice, and they were having rallies. So they wanted to quieten him down and others, and it makes yourself look good. And you figure there's some police that, and most police, and I've worked in it 30-something years, are the best people, but they're all human. You read every day about a cop that's been caught. Some cop could easily say, yeah, these people are kind of losers anyway. If they didn't do this, they'd be doing something else.
Exactly.
And the ones I would have looked at the most before I ever even got off, of course, the Susan Galbert thing got them on to Cross and the rest. But when you have a crime like this, what you look at first is the boyfriend, the husband, those type, because that fits in more. And especially both of her boyfriends at that time, or acquaintances, were involved with drug dealing and so forth. And one tried to get back into the apartment after she was killed. So why was he trying to get back in that apartment? The state police, and I've watched those polygraphs through, and they were some of the best done that I've ever seen. Both of them showed deception on the polygraph regarding her murder. And as an investigator, and I think Dale will tell you the same thing, if I've got polygraph results like that, the defendant or the suspect and I are going to do a lot more talking before I take off to somebody else.
So
Right.
it seems like particularly down in this area, good old boy rule still.
You know, I think a lot of it, and that may be, I don't know the politics in Western Kentucky, because I'm not from Western Kentucky, I'm from Louisville. But I think a lot of the problem is that you've got a small agency that does not, I don't think Mayfield gets a lot of homicides, do they?
No.
Okay, so you have people who have very little homicide experience investigating homicides. Investigating a homicide is different than investigating a narcotics case, in this case, like this, a burglary, a car theft. It's different. There's precise information that you got to get. There's autopsies. There's all this. Her clothes allegedly was thrown away. The coroner's office, the medical examiner did the autopsy, and the clothes. The medical examiner asked the police officer, "Do you want the clothes?" And none of them, they didn't want it, so it was thrown away.
And they didn't even keep the maggots, which you can tell,
A lot
how
from
long the maggots.
It seems that I read somewhere that her panties were cut in half.
Yes, that's
and were
true.
still there on
Right.
the scene.
Yes.
But there was a swabs that were done, rape kit test, that results show it didn't show anything on that as far as that. So honestly, I don't think she was raped. I think that she was murdered because something was happening in Mayfield at that time. She was the knowledge of or something, and she was made an example for to have other people shut up, or the only other option would be a boyfriend, baby's daddy, whatever, that there was some anger
all
there.
the stuff that you talk about, like the crime scene.
I'm guessing on either one of those because I don't know all the.
I understand. But from what is known about the crime scene, particularly that last thing that I mentioned, her panties being there, but yet we accept the word of people who say she was killed, her daughter brought here, her body burned.
Right.
She had a sheet around her. She was naked. In
She
the sheet.
wasn't.
but she's fully clothed, and her panties are there at the scene.
Yeah, and been cut.
But they removed the sheet, the alleged sheet that she was wrapped in.
And
That
Quincy
doesn't make
raped her
sense.
at the house and all of that, but they put her panties back on and undressed her back in the clothes.
It's
so she could be-
unbelievable, and we talked about how bodies bloat when in the heat, and so it's unbelievable. And then also back to one of her friends, Jeremy Adams, who she had a child with. The police interviewed a service station attendant that evening, and Jeremy Adams purchased gasoline, and there's supposed to have been a video of that in which that is never showed back up. So, I mean, there's a lot more that needs to be looked at.
It's almost like, I would think, in the realms of law enforcement investigation and all that kind of stuff, of people who try to do like they're supposed to
Right.
in law enforcement.
And most people do in law
West
enforcement.
Kentucky is a laughing stock of law enforcement now.
Well,
In this particular case,
the thing is, in Kentucky law enforcement itself,
we've got about a minute or so left to go.
okay, DOCJT, who trains law enforcement, is probably some of the best in the United States. Great police academy. But when you get onto the local level, there's a lot of it is funding. There's not a lot of funds, and there's just not a lot of experience. And if anything can be learned from this, I would think that the Attorney General's office does need to investigate. And I'm trying to hurry up. Investigate stuff like this because of murders, but they need to do it with experienced murder investigators. You got Louisville Police Department, you got homicide investigators who have a lot of experience, unfortunately. Would be great people to take them out of retirement, give them a job, and have them investigate these. They've got the experience. Local police and smaller agencies and Kentucky State Police out here do not have that kind of experience.
Right.
And they're trying to do the best they can. A lot of times, I'm not talking about this particular case, but other cases, they're doing the best they can, but they do not have the experience to deal with these types of cases.
A rule of thumb in the world: if you don't know how to do something, don't tell nobody you don't know how to do it. Just
That's true. That
do
happens.
whatever. Thank you so much for coming.
sir.
Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome, sir.
I'm honored to have met you.
Thank you.
And to have heard and learned and understood that, as John says often, you are a law enforcement agent of integrity.
Thank you.
And we need so much more of that in this area. Thank you so much, John. I'll be talking with you.
All right.
You better ask Scott about how you're supposed to treat that person before you decide yourself. For Minority Focus, I'm Jimmie Moore.